up until the mid-50s, they formed the vast majority of boats that we saw on our waterways, mainly because, of course, of the fact that high-powered to weight ratio engines really weren't available. Then in the 50s, we got engines which were capable of driving large boats very quickly because they were light and developed a lot of horsepower. And displacement boats effectively disappeared from the market. We had no manufacturers of any significance interested in building them. And of course, the reason for that was that nobody was interested in buying them. Then came the fuel crisis of the 70s, and all of a sudden the boat building industry started looking seriously again at displacement boats because of their incredible cost effectiveness. Now, the fuel crisis is no longer with us, although I know I experience a crisis every time I have to pay for topping up the tanks. But the displacement boat has established itself alongside the planing boats of similar size as a viable piece of equipment in the marketplace. And I guess part of it is the fact that it does cost so much to top the tanks up, and people find that they can have a boat which is superb in its interior accommodation, extremely seaworthy, capable of making long passages, and whilst it may not be quite as fast as the planing boats, it's certainly far more cost effective. And the nice equalising factor is that once you're offshore, if there's any sort of a sea on, the planing boats have to come back to displacement boat speeds anyhow. So in real terms, there isn't any great advantage nowadays in owning a boat which has vast amounts of horsepower and is capable of doing an extremely high speed. The displacement boat, or semi-displacement boat, as is the case with the Fairway 36, will do all that the planing boats will, and do it far more economically. It's around about 4 years since we looked at Wally Schuber's very first Fairway 36. Now, he's a small manufacturer who builds only around about 5 or 6 or 8 boats a year, and he specialises in custom fitting out these boats. This particular boat, by the way, has been built for the Runaway Bay Art Union and will be shown at the Brisbane Boat Show. Now, you'll see the interior in just a moment, but as I said, Wally really does set these boats up in a custom way, and of all the boats he's built in the 4 years or so since he first started, each of them are entirely different in the interior layout and are built specifically to the owner's requirements and specifications. She has an overall length of 36 feet, a beam of 12. She draws 3 feet. She does up to 18 knots with the Perkins engine, which you'll see in just a moment, which is 240 horsepower. She's capable of 11 knots with 120 horsepower and around about 10 knots with 80 horsepower, and 600 nautical miles range with 80 to 100 horsepower. So that certainly gives her a handsome performance. The engine for the Fairway is particularly interesting. It's a Perkins 6-cylinder diesel. It's the T6.35 4. It produces 240 horsepower at 2,400 RPM. Now, that is a lot of horsepower at relatively low revs. It's turbocharged and aftercooled. The turbocharger is freshwater cooled. Now, it's an engine which has only recently been introduced in its refined form to the market by Perkins. And, of course, you can hear quite a lot of noise because the covers are off. But Wally Schuber's gone to a lot of trouble to insulate the underneath of these covers. The boat is very, very quiet when it's running along, and it certainly is a superbly smooth and powerful power unit. Now, if you just have a look down under here, all of the underfloor area of this boat is set up to survey standards. A very heavy shaft, all of the skin fittings will go straight through in survey, but down underneath that shaft, you can see one of the reasons why this boat is so easy to steer and so seaworthy, and that's the very, very deep hollow moulded deadwood, which is moulded in as a part of the hull. Another excellent feature of the Fairway. By the way, the gearbox that you saw there is a twin disc gearbox, which really is top of the line. As I mentioned, the underfloor area of this boat is built in survey. The boats can be built in survey in all states, and with the 80 horsepower diesel, Perkins diesel that I mentioned a little earlier that the boat can be fitted with, she can be used to great advantage in a hire or bareboat charter capacity. The interior is superbly done. All of the Burmese teak furniture is done by Barry Wicks of Shipshape Joinery at Labrador on the Gold Coast. And it's typical of the sort of cooperation that you find between small manufacturers in a relatively small community. Everything is absolutely superbly done. Certainly a state-of-the-art semi-displacement cruiser capable of around about 18 knots with her 240 horsepower, the Fairway 36 from Fairway Marine on the Gold Coast.